Well, hello to everybody, and welcome to this stream. Today we're going to be covering, and I know that a couple of days ago I actually said that I was going to have a series for you and that I was going to try to do it every single day. But unfortunately, I did try to do it yesterday, but I was not able to get a solid signal to be able to do a live stream because of the location that I chose to go to. And so that's why I did not do a live stream yesterday. Anyways, my name is Charles Richard, and we're going to be covering in this series that I have prepared for you how to live stream. Today we're going to be covering bandwidth, and we're also going to be covering something called how to do a speed test. Those are the two most important and the two fundamental things that you need to be able to understand, because it is not just about having the best equipment and being able to stream in 4K and being able to have a $3,000 camera. All of that plays a certain role within your live stream. But if your ISP, that is your internet service provider, if they cannot provide the platform to be able to hold that amount of data that a 4K signal is required and is needed so that you are able to be seen by the viewers in a very nice and smooth stream, is just not going to happen. All right, so there are a few steps that need to be done so that you who are looking or thinking or maybe even streaming right now can determine whether you actually have what it takes to be able to support the amount of data that you are going to be putting through, so that when it gets to whether it's YouTube, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitch, so that when it gets there, it actually looks very nice and clean. All right, so first of all, again, my name is Charles Richard. All right, I am doing what we call a multi-stream. What is a multi-stream? A multi-stream is where you get different platforms. Like, for example, I am streaming simultaneously to YouTube, Facebook, and to Twitch. Now, each of these platforms have different requirements, and these requirements are set by the platform itself. Now, that is besides other things. For example, each platform does certain things with your signal when they get that particular signal, and you have to understand what the platform does to your signal, because sometimes everything that you have is perfect, but because they are doing what is called encoding, in other words, they take your signal and they recode it, and when they recode it, sometimes when the signal has been recoded, you see little like jumps, on your video. It could be because the service that you have chosen, like YouTube, is very anonymous, all right, or very popular, all right, for doing that. They are extremely known, okay, for doing this, where your signal looks very nice, very clean. As a matter of fact, you record your signal and it's really nice, but when you see it on YouTube, it's like, oh my God, why is it jumpy? Why do I look like I'm going like you know what I'm saying? And so that's important to be able to understand the very basics, all right, so that these things are omitted, all right, and so that it doesn't happen to you. And all of the YouTube channels that I have seen, and I have searched and I have searched and I have searched, all of the YouTube channels talk about equipment. They talk about how great of an equipment you need to have, or what is the best equipment for web streaming, and to do live streams, and what is the best capture card. And yes, all of that is important, but again, if your platform doesn't support it, in other words, if your ISP, whatever service provider you have, doesn't have the capability to hold that signal for you, then it doesn't matter what you do. all right, it's just not going to happen. And it doesn't matter how much money you spend, it's not going to happen for you. All right, so with that said, this show or this particular stream, I'm going to cover as best that I can, and I'm not just going to tell you. I've actually, actually prepared a PowerPoint presentation, all right, and certain things that I have prepared for you. It's taken me a while to prepare it for you because I've got other things that I do, but I'm doing this because I think it's so important for you. I think it is so 100% important for you that you do understand this, so that you don't get surprised. But before we get started, let me please ask you, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Yes, there you are. Please subscribe to our channel, so that way, when you do see something of this sort of nature, you can get notified as to when it is that I'm going to stream and how I do it. Just go ahead. If you're on Twitch, I think they're called followers. I'm still very new, guys. I'm very new to Twitch, and I ask you that you guys help me with Twitch because I really don't quite understand all the ins and outs of Twitch, so I'm very new to Twitch, so if you guys can help me with that, I really appreciate it, and again, this is Charles Richard, and our channel is all about trying to help you the best way that I can in the things that I know that has worked for me, because I am experiencing it. And so all these things, through my experiences, I want to bring to you to hopefully to better help you. Now, one of the things that I do want to kind of like make clear to you folks is the way that I am actually doing this particular stream. We here, okay, at this particular channel, we actually stream from different locations, all right? Every location, because it is remote, because it might be a cafe, it might be a restaurant. Every single location has a different provider, ISP provider, and depending on the ISP provider that they have or that they're using, the service that they're using, it allows me to either have a good stream or have a bad stream. In other words, have enough bandwidth to be able to stream or not. Now, I also have cellular. I also have 5G on my cellular, and my 5G cellular can get costly sometimes, because sometimes when I stream, it takes a lot of bandwidth and it takes a lot of data, and I have to pay for that, and I'm not making any money off of this, and it doesn't really matter to me, because believe me, I am more than happy to pay for something for you folks, as long as it is benefiting you folks and helping you become better content, not only content creators, but be able to have a nicer stream. So with that said, I just wanted to get that kind of, throw that in there for you, so that you guys can understand, a little bit as to where I'm at, the process of streaming, and what it actually takes, to be able to get this wonderful streams out there for you. And now, I don't know if all my chats are actually working. I still do not know that, but I'm going to leave my comments open. My chats are open, and I want to leave the comments open in case you have any questions. You can go ahead and you can ask me via the comments, because some of you are not going to watch this live. You might watch it after the stream is over, because I will post it, and it's going to be on Facebook, YouTube, and also on Twitch. So if you want to ask me something, just go ahead and write it in the comments. I do read the comments, and I will try to get back to you. Again, this whole series is about live streaming. So today I want to cover what we call bandwidth. Bandwidth is what I am going to cover today. All right, and let me bring you excuse me, let me bring you into this PowerPoint presentation. The first thing that we want to see is we want to take a look at what is required by each platform. In other words, what is required by YouTube, what is required by Facebook, and what is required by Twitch. There are other platforms, but I am only going to cover these three because these are the three that I am actually using right now, and the ones that I have been able to measure, and the ones that I have information. I have information about some of the other ones as well, but if I don't use it, I will not bring it to you, because I do not bring anything into this stream or into these broadcasts unless I have tested it and I have actually experienced it, and I can actually tell you my experiences and more, you know what I'm saying? Because it's important that we as content creators, when we actually do these how-to videos, we just don't say, oh well, this is how it is because such and such, or I read this over here, or I saw this over here, and this is how it is. No, I don't do that. I do it because I actually did it. All right, so that's the first thing. I want to get that kind of over with. All right, and so let's take a look at this first presentation, and this first presentation has to do with bandwidth. Okay, bandwidth. All right, so let's take a look at this. All right, and give me a second. I want to kind of bring this up to you guys, and here we go. All right, we're going to talk about bandwidth. It is very important that you understand what bandwidth is. Bandwidth is kind of like if I were to describe it as a plumber. All right, bandwidth is the size of the pipe that carries your water, all right, from point A to point B. The bigger the pipe, the more water it can carry. The smaller the pipe, the less water it can carry. So if you are, let's say, in your neighborhood, in the block where you live, the water comes from the water source, from the city water, whatever the source may be, all right, it comes into that particular block, and that particular block might have a, let's say, a large amount of residents, and because it has a large amount of residents, it's going to need a size of tube big enough to carry enough water to be able to supply all the different homes within that block. And so some areas, your actual pipe to be able to carry that water needs to be bigger, and some don't need to be as big, right? So bandwidth works pretty much the same way, but the difference is that now it works, instead of being water, all right, picture it as electronic data, all right? And the bigger the bandwidth is, the more data it has the ability to carry and to support, to be able to carry it from point A to point B. And just like the water simulation with data, when data comes into a neighborhood, if your bandwidth is there, all right, then everybody, all the different houses will get a certain amount of data that they have disposable for their usage. Now, what does that mean? Okay, that means that even though you might have a fiber optic, the fiber optic is a form of pipe or a form of bandwidth, even though you have fiber optic, and that is the fastest bandwidth that or available bandwidth that's available, even though you have fiber optics, if you have a lot of residents using that fiber optics, that fiber optic might be limited by that amount of residents. And then just because you have residents doesn't mean that it is not or let me rephrase that, just because you have a lot of residents, it doesn't mean that the bandwidth is not available. It might be available, but it might not be available at a certain time because there's a lot of residents that are actually on the internet and they're all streaming video. All right, and when they're all streaming video, it requires a lot of bandwidth, and they might be also uploading videos, and so that also there's a certain amount of bandwidth that is required, and therefore the amount of bandwidth, although you are on a fiber optic cable, all right, is restricted, because a whole lot of people that actually use that trunk, okay, trunk is the simile word used for like pipe, right? So the amount of people that are going into that trunk, all right, is more than what it actually can support, and therefore you're gonna have like bumps and little things like that that affect your signal as well. All right, so we're gonna cover all of this, okay? So I know that I'm getting very technical, all right, but just hang on and bear with me, because I promise you that I'm gonna make it really nice and simple for you so that you understand what it is that we're talking about. Okay, so let's look at some of these platforms, all right? So one of the platforms that we're going to talk about, okay, is, let's understand, okay, what upload speeds, okay? What should you be aiming for? All right, well, you cannot aim, all right, for something that you don't have the platform for, all right? And this is what I'm trying to explain to you folks, all right? If you think that you can stream, or you think that you have all your equipment to be able to stream 4K, don't be disappointed that you can't, or that your video signal that people are watching, that your viewers are watching, doesn't look good, because it might not be your equipment, all right? It might be the bandwidth that's available to you, all right? So this is why it is so important. It is so important for you to be able to understand bandwidth, all right? The first thing that you need to start with, realistically, talking realistically, is you need to know what is available for you. If you don't know what's available for you, how are you going to know whether or not you're going to be able to stream a 4K stream? The answer to that question is you are not. You're not going to be able to know whether you're able to stream a 4K video, whether it's 60 frames per second or 30 frames per second, if you do not understand what your bandwidth is, and if you don't really know what it is that your internet service provider, okay, whether it is Comcast, Spectrum, AT&T, whatever your ISP, internet service provider, is providing for you, if you don't know what it is that they provide for you for your download speeds as well as your upload speeds, you're not going to know whether or not your stream is going to be nice and even, all right? So with that said, we're not going to talk so much about the internet service providers, not quite yet, okay? So just hang on tight to that thought, okay? Because now what I'd like to tell you, and what I would like to show you, is what about these platforms? Okay, so what about YouTube? What about Twitch? What about Facebook, right? What is it that they require so that you can put that signal through, and so that it looks good, right? So knowing what these platforms require will help you make a better decision, all right? So now these platforms, all right, that we're going to be talking about, they also have different type of streams that they can do. For example, all right, Facebook allows you to stream 720, and it also allows you to stream 1080. Now with that 1080 quote unquote, I need to make sure that you understand something, that 1080 is only available for certain people in Facebook, all right? You have to apply for 1080. So the normal bandwidth that Facebook provides for the general population on Facebook is 720. Now YouTube, which is a more robust and a more solid platform, YouTube will take, you know, streams that are 720, they'll take streams that are 1080, they'll take streams that are 2K, and they'll take streams that are 4K. All right, so with that said, okay, each stream requires a certain amount of bandwidth. All right, so follow me for a second because we're gonna go into all of these requirements. And Twitch does the same thing. Now, the others that I did not mention, like Periscope, and there's a few other ones that you can do all this. We're not covering those in this particular show because I don't use them. Okay, so let's move on and let's see what is required by each one. So let's start with Facebook. Okay, here we go. All right, Facebook Live. Okay, the platform. Okay, for Facebook Live. Okay, it recommends a maximum bit of 4,000 kilobits per second for video. All right, now this is what they're recommending. All right, it doesn't mean that it doesn't really mean, all right, that you need 4,000 kilobits per second, and if you have a 6,000, they're not gonna do your stream. No, all right, anything 4,000 or above is a good signal for you. All right, and that is what this particular Facebook here is actually asking for. Now, with that said, all right, this Facebook has certain requirements, okay, for your 720. If you look on the blue, all right, you look on the blue section right there, okay, you will see, okay, that Facebook, let me see if I can get myself a little bit better here, all right, because I want to be able to read this, okay, to you guys. All right, so if we look at 720p, okay, you look at 720p, all right, I don't know if you can see it right here. Okay, this is 720p right here. All right, if you look at 720p at 30 frames or at 60 frames per second, all right, they're able to actually stream this. Okay, they're actually able to stream this. They are able to carry this on, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so with that said, all right, let's take a look at 720p at 30 frames per second, all right, or 60 frames per second for anybody that is a normal user. Okay, a user that is not or has not been approved for a 1080 signal, all right, can stream on Facebook with 720 at 30 frames per second or at 60 frames per second. Now, in order for you to be able to stream at 30 or 60 frames per second, you need to have roughly between 3 to 4 megabytes per second. 3 or 4 megabytes per second is what is recommended by Facebook. And this is their requirements. Now, one of the things that I do, okay, one of the things that I like to do is I look at this particular information and I look at it and I say to myself, okay, I want to stream at, and this is how my train of thought works, and this is how you need to think about this. So if I want to stream at 720, okay, 30 frames per second, or 60 frames per second, all right, which is what Facebook is actually telling us here. And I know that I need between 3 to 4 megabits per second because that is what Facebook is asking for. I'm not going to get 3 or 4 megabits per second. I'm not going to try to look for 3 or 4 megabits per second. I'm going to add 40% buffer to that, okay? Or even 50% buffer. So that means that if I need 4 megabits per second, 50% of 4 is 2. So 4 plus 2, which is my 50% buffer, equals 6 megabits per second. So I'm going to look for a signal that is 6 megabits per second or better because I need a buffer. And the reason that I need a buffer is because I know that a lot of internet service providers, okay, ISPs, the signal fluctuates. And so if the signal fluctuates, I want to make sure that I have enough headroom so that if it fluctuates, it doesn't drop below 4 megabits per second. Because once it stops dropping from 4 megabits per second, that's when the video starts getting choppy. Right? Are you guys following me? Okay, I hope that you guys are following me in what I'm trying to explain. And again, if you have any questions, please comment, and I will answer them as best that I can. Now, this is for Facebook. All right, so let's look at Twitch. Okay, here we go for Twitch. Twitch is a little bit different. If you look at what the requirements are, Twitch, for example, is requiring at 720 p at 30 frames per second. They are requiring, look at the numbers, okay, if you see the numbers right here, okay, 2,500 to 4,000 kilobytes per second would do. That translates to upload speeds between 3.2 megabits per second and around 5 megabits per second. Now, how did they get those numbers? Those numbers that you see right there are with the buffer. Okay, Twitch provides you with that information. Twitch tells you, hey guys, this is what we're requiring, but if we put that 40 or 50% buffer, okay, what you should be looking for is this right here, 3.2 megabits and around 5 megabits per second, which is about correct. Because remember, when I did the computation for Facebook at 720, and I told you that I was going to do a 50% buffer, okay, that 50% buffer that I did, or that I added on, gave me the 6 megabytes per second. Twitch doesn't require that much, and Twitch on their numbers have not given you a 50% buffer, but a 40% buffer. And in reality, a 40% buffer will work. I just like a little bit more. I don't want to be too much more, because then I've got to be realistic. Okay, talking realistically, a lot of ISP providers don't give you that upload bandwidth to be able to stream. So now you're limiting yourself. So now we're talking about, okay, what is it? We're talking about what is it that we actually need for these platforms, and then we're going to talk about what is available to you. All right, and so let's move on and let's take a look. Okay, now take a look at the numbers down here. Okay, 720, you see right there, 720 at 60 frames per second. The bit rate should be between 3,500 and 5,000. It's a lot more than 30 frames per second. So what that means is that now I need to have between 4.4 megabytes per second and 6.2 megabytes per second to be able to have a nice stream for Twitch. All right, now let's go and move on, because Twitch also does 1080. Now the bigger the resolution, all right, that you're streaming, the more megabytes per second that you need. So that means that a 720 frames per second, or I'm sorry, 720 at 30 frames per second, or a 720 at 60 frames per second does not need the amount of bandwidth that a 1080 needs. Even though the 1080 might be 30 frames per second, versus a 720 at 60 frames per second, the signal is not as, the data that is needed to be able to put that signal through is not as big. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at Twitch. Watch this, okay? Now here we go. We are still at Twitch, okay? Now Twitch here is we're looking right now at 1080, okay? At 1080p at 30 frames per second. If you remember, okay, the 720 at 60 frames per second pretty much requires the same amount of data of bitrate, because it was 3,500 to 5,000 kilobits per second, which means you're gonna need a a 4.4 megabits per second, and up to a 6.2 megabits per second. These two streams, whether it is at 720 frames per second, at 720, or even, let me rephrase that. Although it is 720 at 60 frames per second, is what I meant to say, or 1080 at 30 frames per second, they both need the same amount of bandwidth for Twitch. Listen to me what I'm saying. This is for Twitch. You're gonna see that the numbers change when you go to YouTube. YouTube numbers change, and for Facebook the numbers change, the requirements change. So you need to know what is required by each platform so that you understand what is required by that platform. If your service provider is able to give you that, then you will be able to have a beautiful stream where your video doesn't jump up and down. So let's keep going. All right, now we look down here. Okay, we've got at 1080 at 60 frames per second. The recommended bit rate is between 4,500 and 6,000 kilobits per second. Now we're getting up there, all right, because now, okay, the speed that we're looking at is between 5.6 megabits and 7.4 megabits per second. Those are the requirements that you need, all right? This is just to be able to do a simple 1080p at 60 frames per second. This is not 4K. This is not none of that stuff, okay? We're still at 1080. We haven't even touched, okay, 4K. So let's go to the next one and let's see what else, all right, is our capabilities and what are we capable of doing. Okay, so we're going to look at YouTube. All right, YouTube is the only one that actually supports 4K. All right, they support 2K, they support 4K, but the amount of bandwidth that you need is ridiculous. Okay, I mean ridiculous. So for you guys that think that you're going to be able to stream 4K, okay, wait till we see these numbers. All right, wait till we see these numbers. Now check this out. For YouTube at 720 30 frames per second, all right, the range, okay, that you see down here is between 1500 to 4000 kilobits, which means it's about 2 megabits to 5 megabits per second is what you need for a 720 stream. Now it jumps, okay, it jumps tremendously, and it jumps, you know, crazy tremendously, because remember that for Twitch and for Facebook we didn't need, okay, the crazy amount of bandwidth that YouTube is asking for a 720 at 60 frames per second. Okay, at 720 at 60 frames per second, okay, the range is between 2250 to 6000 kilobits per second. That's speed wise, which means that you're gonna need between 2.9 megabits per second and 7.4 megabits per second. You remember that the other one was only at only 6 megabits per second. Only 6 megabits per second. YouTube jumps it up, right, and adds another probably 1.4 megabits per second, all right. And is it because of their formula? You know, well, you know, basically what they're trying to tell you, okay, and the reason that they've done these numbers is because YouTube actually suffers the most from what is called signal fluctuation, which means that the signal is not always constant at a certain level. And so because there is that fluctuation between here and there, all right, you know, which is much greater than that of Facebook, which is from here to here, then they require much more bandwidth just for you to be able to assert yourself that your signal, all right, and your stream is going to be stable and it's not going to have any sort of frames lost or crashes or anything of that sort. So let's continue and let's look at how ridiculous YouTube gets. Okay, so for all you guys that want to stream on YouTube, I want you to pay really close attention, all right, so that you understand what it is that is needed. Okay, let's look at 1080. All right, look at the 1080. At 1080 at 30 frames per second, just at 30 frames per second, all right, your bit range is from between 3000 to 6000 kilobytes per second, which translates to 3.8 megabits per second and 7.4 megabits per second. So that is a 1080 30 frames per second. So that means that my stream signal, if my stream signal is not 7.4 megabits per second, you know, I wouldn't even try to stream at 1080. All right. So in my situation, because I am going from cafe to cafe and from restaurant to restaurant, and I'll probably be going on cruise ships, or I go into Disney property, my bandwidth that is available to me most of the time is only around 7 megabits per second. Sometimes I can get 11 megabits per second. If I go on my 5G and I got a strong signal, all right, then, you know, the numbers are ridiculously high, you know what I'm saying, as long as I am close to a 5G tower, you know. So all of this makes me decide what bandwidth I am going to actually use to be able to stream, all right, these live streams that you see right here. So let's take a look at this other one, okay, at 1080, okay, p at 60 frames per second, all right. The bit range is now from 4,500 to 9,000 kilobits per second, all right, which means that now my upload speed is 5.6 megabits per second and 11 megabits per second. That's a ridiculous number, okay? These 11 megabits per second, most people are not able to support. Most ISPs do not give you the upload speeds to be able to support that type of signal, all right? So that's just the way it is, and that's for YouTube. All right, that is for YouTube. If you look at the Twitch numbers are a lot less, and because they are a lot less, your signals look much better. All right, so let's go and let's take a look at. We're gonna look at 2K now. All right, let's look at 2K. All right, 1440. 1440, by the way, guys, 1440 is 2K. 1440 at 30 frames per second. Now YouTube supports 1440 stream. At 1440 at 30 frames per second that you see here, all right, is between 6,000 to 13,000 kilobits per second. All right, 6,000 to 13 kilobits per second, which means that your upload speeds are going to go between 7.4 megabits per second and 15.8 megabits per second. You know, that's getting up there, okay? That's getting up there. Some homes, if you have somebody like a Comcast or somebody like Spectrum, you know, and if you have one of those, really, elite packages, you know, you have the capability to do that, right? But there's other things that play with all of this, and we want to cover all of that because I want to make sure that you understand, and I want to try to explain it as best as I can so that you can analyze what it is that is available to each one of you, so that you can see what is the stream that your bandwidth and that your internet service provider will support for you. Okay, so let's look at the 2K. Here we go on the bottom. You see 2K at 60 frames per second. Okay, now this is 2K at 60 frames per second. Now look at this. It jumps up from 11 megabits per second to 21 megabits per second. That's what you need, right? Because the frame rates, okay, here the range, okay, between 9,000 to 18,000 kilobits per second, and this is your requirements that YouTube is requiring from you to be able to support a 2K stream. Now, are you ready for this? Let's take a look at 4K. Here we go, guys. Okay, 4K at 30 frames per second will require you to upload between 13,000 and 34,000 kilobits per second. In terms of speed, that means that you need to have a signal that is 15.8 megabits per second and 41 megabits per second. 41 megabits per second. All right. Now, if you're going to stream like I am streaming from a cafe, the answer to 4K is no. All right. No cafe is going to allow me to stream that sort of bandwidth, because all of these cafes, they gotta pay for their internet provider, and data that is being used costs them money. So no, okay, the most that I can do coming from a cafe, a restaurant, or anything of that nature is probably, 1080 30 frames per second, and sometimes 1080 60 frames per second. Now, if I use my 5G from my actual cell tower, then yes, I am able to stream at 4K 30 frames per second, because 5G does support the bandwidth, and it allows me and it gives me the bandwidth that I need to be able to have a solid, steady stream. But not everywhere that I go gives me the capability to hit a 5G tower. And we're going to talk about all of this, okay? And so just hang on tight, okay? Because here we go. All right, so let's move on and let's take a look at these crazy numbers, okay? A 4K at 60 frames per second, the recommended bit range, all right, is between 20,000 to 51,000 kilobits per second, which means that what you need for speed is just ridiculous. It's 24.2 megabits per second and around 61.5 megabits per second. So if you have Spectrum, Comcast, any of those internet service providers, or I want to say television network stations, cable TV, if you have your normal customer plan, you're not going to get those signals. All right, I can tell you that right now. You will not get those signals. You have to jump into the elite. Okay, you have to jump into the elite, or otherwise you will not get those signals. Right. So with that said, all right, let me kind of come up here. Okay, really quick. Take this out of. Oops. All right, and do we have this here? I think we do. Okay, and so, all right, with that said, all right, let's look at other scenarios, okay? Because there's other scenarios that we want to look at, and we want to look at, all right, so how do I know what is available to me? Well, the way that you're going to know what is available to you is by doing a speed test. Now, when you do a speed test, the speed test will measure the signal, all right, your download speeds, and it will measure your upload speeds. When it measures these signals vary, and these tests vary depending where it is and how it is that you measure, all right, or should I say, what ISP do you actually hit to measure your bandwidth that is available to you. All right, so let's move on, and let's and let me show you what I'm talking about. All right, so let's go back, all right, and let's look at speed test. All right, this here that you see here, this is a speed test. All right, when you go on the internet, okay, the only thing you have to do is you Google, all right, and once you Google, do a quick Google, you can put in speed test, and you will see certain providers. I particularly like to go to this speed test, because if you see, let me see if I can bring it this way, because I want to be able, okay, here we go. All right, if you see up here, okay, I do my speed test through AT&T. Now, I like using AT&T because AT&T gives me the ability, all right, to do several things. Okay, one of the things that AT&T allows me to do is to look at my ISP. Okay, in other words, the servers that I am going to use to be able to send a signal, so that signal can bounce back to me, so that I can see how much it is that is available to me. Okay, are you guys following me so far? All right, so just hang tight and follow with me, all right, because I'm going to show you how to set this up, okay, and how to know what is available to you. All right, let me do a little quick adjusting over here. I needed to do a quick adjusting. All right, so I want to be able to show you this. Okay, so here we go. So when I look back at this, let me see if I can move this. I need to move this here. All right, okay, all right. Okay, so when I look at this, you're gonna see, I don't know if you can see my cursor. All right, hopefully you can. All right, this here, okay, if you see download, okay, this is the speed, my download speed. This is the speed that's available to me for my download speed, and this is my speed here that I need to look at. The speed that you see here that I'm looking at here is my upload. That is what's going to affect my stream to either be nice and smooth or not. My download speed is not really going to affect it because I'm not using my streaming software to be able to look at myself. You know what I'm saying? Usually when you do your setup, what you're worried about is your upload, because that is what you use for everybody to see you. Okay, so we're going to talk about these sites. This particular measurement that I did here is from the location that I'm actually streaming from. I am not using 5G. I'm actually using the internet service provider that is available at this location, and because this location has the capability to give me this upload speed. See right there, megabits per second. It gives me 21 megabits per second signal. Now I know what kind of signal I can actually broadcast. All right, so that means that with 21 megabits per second, I'm able to broadcast 720, 1080 without no problem. Now I can do 2K, all right, but I cannot do 4K because there's not enough signal, so therefore I'm not doing 4K. I do not want to do 2K because the reason that I don't do 2K is, if you remember, okay, Facebook does not allow, all right, for 2K, neither does Twitch, all right. They only go up to 1080p, and because I am doing a multicast, my multicast stream, all right, I don't do different feeds for different platforms. In other words, I don't stream at 720 on Facebook, and then on Twitch I stream at 1080, and then on YouTube I stream at 4K. No, I don't do that, all right, because when you start doing that, then you get into other issues that we'll talk about in this series. We will talk about it, and I'll cover that for you. So now, let's take a look at a couple of things, okay? This is called a speed test, all right? Now, if you see here, okay, see where it says a smart city telecom? Well, that is the server that that this particular test is going to use to send a signal so that it can come up with the measurement of how fast my download speed is and how fast my upload speed is, all right? Are you all with me? All right, so let's look at this for a second, okay? I can select, okay, over here I can select, okay, which server I want to actually use to give me these measurements. If I hit here this particular arrow, you will see, okay, that I can select between smart city, or I can select between spectrum, or I can select between villages. I can select between another spectrum. Now here it will tell you how far away is this server from where I'm at. So the signal will be sent, it's called the ping will be sent 17 miles away, and then it will return that signal, and then depending on how fast it returns that signal, it gives me an actual number, okay, for my download speeds as well as my upload speeds, right? I can select Spectrum in Orlando, it's only 15 miles away. Now I select this one, Smart City Telecom, because it is what is recommended. Now I could select another one, but depending on which one you select also depends on the measurements. So your measurements are really kind of an idea of what is available to you, but it's not necessarily what is available to you, because the ISP provider that I'm at right now might not use the Smart City Telecom server. It might go to another server, which will make a big difference as to what my speeds are. So with that covered, okay, let's look at the test. All right, so now if I look at the test over here, all right, we're looking at your download speed and you're looking at your upload speeds. Now, by the way, okay, what I am using here is I am using the AT&T. There's other speed test sites that are available, but in the US, okay, if you are in the US, I very highly recommend something that is reliable, and AT&T is reliable. Okay, AT&T is reliable. The other ones, you really don't have the ability to choose your servers. They just hit whatever it is that they want to hit, and they give you a number, and they're a little bit more off. But I like something that has very reliable. So my recommendation for you is to use AT&T. AT&T gives you a true, and the best, okay, readings that you can get. Right? AT&T's been around for a long time, a lot longer than Spectrum, Comcast, Verizon, all these. So their infrastructure, all right, which is what we're looking at as far as servers, trunks, and all that, is much better laid out all over the country than any other infrastructure. And now I'm not talking about their towers or none of that stuff. I'm talking about what is called the infrastructure. All right, so what we do here, all right, what you do is you want to hit here, you want to hit test. Okay, so I'm going to hit test again. We're going to do a test, and this is what you see. All right, we're doing a live test right now while I am broadcasting. All right, while I'm broadcasting, I'm actually looking. You're looking at the speed, okay, of my download speed. This is what I'm getting from the actual internet service provider that I'm hooked up to, and look at my upload speeds. My upload speeds, so you see how these numbers fluctuate back and forth, back and forth. Those numbers fluctuate because it doesn't matter what service provider you use. Each service provider, all right, does not give you a signal that is always exactly the same. It will always fluctuate for you. All right, it will always be either a little bit here, a little bit off, a little bit there, but it will always fluctuate. All right, so you see now my signal is a little bit better. Now, why is it better? Well, there's several reasons why it can be better. One of them is because at the time that I am streaming, which happens to be 1:26 here in Orlando, Florida, all right, there is not that many people on the internet, which means that it's going to free up some more space for me. It's going to free up some more bandwidth for me, all right, which gives me a bigger number, all right, which means that I have a faster, okay, upload speed. That is what that means. All right, so with that, okay, said, this gives you a very superficial idea of what it is that is required for your basics. Okay, we're talking about here your basics. Okay, the stuff that you need to be able to get a nice stream. So with that said, I hope that this little information that I put together for you will give you a start. And again, in this series, okay, I'm going to cover what it is that we need, how much, not only the bandwidth, but also how to get the signal, all right, from your cameras to your computer, from your computer to your streaming software, and from your streaming software up into the internet via capture card and via cables. We're going to cover how to tell whether a cable that you're using, like an HDMI cable, how to know, all right, whether that cable has the capacity to support a 4K signal, or how do you know that it has the capacity, if you're using USB, all right, that what you have is able to support a 1080, 60 frames per second. We're going to cover all of that, all right? And so, in the final segment of this particular series, I will show you how to put it together, and then what equipment do I recommend for certain streams. Okay, I'm going to give you a recommendation for a 720 setup. I'm going to give you a recommendation for a 1080 setup. I'm going to give you a recommendation for a 2K setup, and I'm going to give you a recommendation for a 4K setup. All right, so anyways, guys, this is Charles Richard. I once again, I would love if you guys would subscribe. Yeah, subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. I'm sorry, and I hope that it wasn't too long, but I hope that what you saw here today will answer some of the questions, basic questions that you need to know if in this new norm that we are living in, because we have to teach via online, and because we're doing all of our meetings, for our company, via online. I hope that this will help you actually answer a lot of these questions. Again, I'm streaming live to you folks, okay, from a coffee shop. So if you hear all that noise and all that banging, it's they're making coffee downstairs, and that's just how it is over here. So this again is Charles Richard. I want to thank you so much for joining me, and hopefully maybe tomorrow I can do my next stream for you. If not, it'll be very shortly right after. It all depends whether or not I have a good signal to be able to stream to you, and if I am, I will definitely stream a next segment, okay, for this how to live stream series that we are doing. In the meantime, I want to thank you for joining me, and I want to hope all of you stay safe, stay well, all right, and I'll see you on our next stream.